Hey, how you doing? Welcome to another video. We're going to go through another comment today, and this is from the other side of the spectrum. This is somebody who has been stopped alcohol for quite a long time, and it's from that success point of view. I think we talk a lot about the first few weeks and months of this journey, how to get into preparation, all the downsides of drinking, and I really wanted to go through this today just to highlight where somebody came from and how far they've come in their journey. So I'll read the pertinent parts of this, and then you can pause the video if you want to watch more of it. It's from Johnny Rooker, and he said, "Hi Kevin, 9 years ago I was a heavy drinker. I was sad, depressed and desperate. I wanted to quit, but I wasn't able to. Then I started looking at videos on YouTube and I found yours. I've watched many videos and they've helped to keep me motivated during my withdrawal." And he goes on to say that he found strength and inspiration and courage, and he started to find different desires in his life. Look, this is all down to you, Johnny. It's when you put the hard work in, it takes a lot of courage to step across that line in the beginning, to make that decision. Look at how often and how much we put this off. We sweep our problems underneath the rug and say, well, this is not happening, or it's not happening as bad as that. And it's only really when we get to that stage where our perceived problems or the perceived costs outweigh the benefits, the perceived benefits that we're getting. So it's there's no longer a trade-off that we're willing to make, and it's always something that happens. I mean, most people, when they stop, they're in a vulnerable position. Now, I'm not saying that we're down and out and we're living in a doorway, but I am saying that there is a spot in your life when you no longer believe in what you're doing. You no longer believe that this path that you're on is taking you anywhere good, and that's when change happens. So it's one of the reasons I'm not going to piss on AA, right? As an organization, I think it helps a lot of people, right? But the ideas behind AA, I think a lot of these places catch people when they're vulnerable, and they kind of keep people in that vulnerability for a long time, if not forever. When people start believing that they are an addict for the rest of their lives, that they've got problems for the rest of their lives with alcohol, one drink away from it, all that kind of stuff. I don't agree with that. And I think it keeps people in that victim mentality, right? So I think it takes courage to do this on your own. It takes courage to face into that vulnerability. And sometimes it needs, the courage comes from a rage at something specific. I looked at myself when I started out this journey, and I saw myself as being a bad father in that particular sense, that I was teaching my son how to drink, or I'd led him down that road into this path, however much my culpability was in that. It's I always say this to dads, your children look up to you more than anyone else in this world, you and mom, right? And as a parent, it's your responsibility more than anything else to be a good role model for your children. And I think drinking alcohol, for me anyway, was something that when I look back, that gave me rage that I did that. Same thing as he's still a smoker, and I was a smoker when he was born, and that it still gives me rage. So those kind of things, it's like I look at my son now. He's 31 years of age, and it's up to him what he does. It's his choice at the same time, but at the same time as that, I look at myself and I go, well, yeah, a lot of that responsibility is down to me. So I'm saying, with the courage part of this, you build courage as you're moving forwards. The more experience you get with yourself not drinking, the easier it becomes to be courageous, right? With the self-confidence and self-belief that you're building. You build a good life, you build more self-confidence, you build more belief in yourself, and that gives you courage. But the real courage is when you're feeling vulnerable, when you're not sure about things, you're not sure about this life, and you step across that line, you make that decision, and you step over regardless of what's happened. So the second part of this you were talking about was the sadness and the depression. You said I was sad and depressed and desperate. We'll cover the desperate in a minute. But sad and depressed, this is part of the game of drinking. you know, any amount of alcohol, when you start using any drug, right? And I'm not talking about this. I'm talking about any physical drug that you're putting into your body, or any negative habit that you're taking up, you know? I mean, I know people who have a running habit so badly that they can't, it becomes an obsession with them. You know, when something is an obsession, it's stopping you from doing other things in your life. Like there are good things. I get up every morning, I read for 2 hours every morning, right? And then I go out for a walk, and normally it's about an hour. So that's 3 hour block of time in the morning. If I don't do those two things, I feel bad about myself. But it pushes me in a good direction. You know, I feel better because I've done those things. It's a positive outcome. When I was drinking, it was the opposite. You know, we've got the same amount of time as a drinker as a non-drinker. When I look at myself, same 24 hours in the day, same 7 days in the week, but you have a different energy, right? Think about all the energy that's going into processing the alcohol, right? Processing the damage. Think about all the energy that you're putting into the negative thinking about it. You know, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have done this. Now, all of that energy you've got now to move into something else. Now, think about from the other perspective of when you're drinking, you're not building the energy. So you know you're supposed to go to sleep at night to recharge yourself. That's not happening when you're drinking. So you're starting out the day with a lack of energy to begin with. So once you stop drinking alcohol, that stops being an issue, and you're burning less energy. You're burning, the more that you work on yourself, the more that you work on your exercise, for instance, your diet, all of these things that you're now, all this time that you used to put into alcohol, now you're able to put into yourself. All of that energy that you build can now be put into different parts. You're building more energy in the beginning, and you're using that energy a lot more efficiently. So, as time goes on, it doesn't matter whether you're, we talk about alcohol as being on a spectrum. So somebody who's drinking occasionally and somebody who's drinking every day a lot, they're still on the same spectrum. You're still putting alcohol inside your body, right? If you get up in the morning and you don't feel good for it, you're feeling a hangover, or you're feeling a headache, that's going to affect you for the day, or it's going to affect you for an hour or 2 hours, whatever it is. There is an effect from it because you're putting a toxin into your body, and your body is, instead of, I'll give you an instance of, I wake up in the morning. Now I'm fresh and ready to go for the day. I'm looking forward to the day ahead. I go to bed at night, looking forward to the day tomorrow. That's the general idea of my life. Sometimes it doesn't work out like that, sometimes you're just tired, whatever, but it in general. And, when you put a toxin into your body, you're putting a handbrake on that. You're putting an impediment in your own way, and that you're doing that, right? It's not as if we don't, we can rationalize this and we can push it under the carpet as much as we want. We still know that we're doing it to ourselves. So even those small amounts of alcohol that we're putting into our bodies slow us to a degree from getting to the goals that we want to achieve, right? And there's a conflict. That conflict of knowing that the alcohol is bad for you, knowing that you're doing this to yourself, that nobody else is forcing you to do this to yourself, but at the same time, you wanting to believe that you're a smart person. It is what it is. So, when we're talking about the sadness and the depression, they're two words that don't describe the fact that we've got a hangover, or that we've got a headache, or we're tired the next morning. They describe the fact that we've got this horrible feeling that our life is slipping away, right? And this only happens after you've done 10 years or 15 years of drinking. It doesn't happen the next day. You feel the next day you get up and you think, I'm tired, I've got a hangover today. Boo-hoo, feel sorry for myself, right? But it's only when you've done that for a long time and you realize that all that time and energy combined, what you could have done with that energy and time. So it's going back and looking at it from that perspective. And, when we're thinking about things from the perspective of, he said at the beginning, hold on, glasses, it's one of the things with age, right? I was sad, depressed, and desperate, right? So he's desperate now at this stage, and I think it takes a lot of time. Desperation is another word for rock bottom, or your particular version of the rock bottom. Like I said, you don't have to be in the gutter. You don't have to be living in a doorway, right? Begging for scraps of food. Rock bottom can happen to anyone at any particular time of life. It's just that desperation comes about when you say to yourself, I can't do this anymore. I'm more afraid of moving forwards and doing the same things that I'm doing now rather than making the change happen. It's weighing things up. So, how many times I tried moderation, and moderation just keeps you trapped. And everyone goes through this cycle. Like I said, 10, 15 years, you're trying to talk yourself out of the real fact of what's going on, so you can keep doing what you're doing, keep the drinking going, or keep the lifestyle going, keep the fact that you don't have to make those changes. Now, I'm not saying, I think periods of alcohol away from periods that you have where you don't drink any alcohol. I had 10 months was the longest I ever did before I stopped altogether. But it gave me good experience of what my life could look like, getting up every morning without hangover, being able to do things and get things done, and feeling good about myself, all of those kind of things. That gives you good experience of what to expect. Now, the longer period you can have, the better. Anyone who goes into it and says, well, I've had 2 weeks or a month and a dry month, you notice those effects, but it's not the same thing moving forwards in terms of the psychological benefit of you saying, I'm never going to drink alcohol again. But that's a different story. Eventually, hopefully, you get to a stage where that desperation that you have, that, if you've had experience of not drinking and then you go back to it and then the same cycle starts up again, that can add to that desperation and get you to move, make those movements that you need to make. But that desperation then can get you to really consider stopping drinking alcohol for good as being a viable option in your life, right? In your particular situation. And then you stop, and lo and behold, you start sleeping better. You've no more hangovers. You're starting to use your time and energy better. You're starting to hit goals that you've, even if they're only moderate goals, minor goals, but you're starting to hit those goals. You're starting to go, well, I'm going to do this today. And then you get that done today. Then you do the same thing tomorrow, so on and so forth. And that sadness that Johnny was talking about earlier on, that sadness lifts, and you start to feel a bit more optimistic about the life without alcohol, right? And maybe excited about the life without alcohol. Like I said, focus forwards instead of backwards. Going backwards and thinking about all the alcohol that you're missing out on. You're not missing out on anything. This guy proved, he says at the beginning he was a heavy drinker, sad, depressed, and desperate, right? But like I said, it's not you're sad and depressed and desperate because of the alcohol. Because if the alcohol wasn't causing you negativity in your life, if it wasn't sending you down this horrible road, right, then you wouldn't be sad and depressed. So it is the life that you're creating for yourself that is making you sad and depressed and desperate. So, like Johnny said at the beginning, first thing to do is to start looking for people who have been in the same situation as you are in now, right? I mean, I've read a lot of books from people talking about alcohol and stopping drinking alcohol. And there's some good advice out there, but it's always better advice if somebody understands. It doesn't have to be from somebody who's drinking, although it helps. It has to be from somebody who understands. There's a great book called, is it the dopamine? Is it the author is Anna Lemke. I think it's Dopamine. I can't remember the name of the book anyway. I'll put it up on down here. And she's talking about different people who are, how the dopamine, the neurochemical dopamine can really get you addicted and can keep you addicted. And she talks about herself, and she's addicted to reading romance novels. Now, you have to read this, how she's describing this, to really understand how it is affecting her and her life. And it's what we were saying earlier on. If you're putting this time and energy into something, it doesn't matter if it's alcohol or something else. I mean, the alcohol, a drug has got a physical component to it, right? So it's going to fuck around with your health and your mental health. But something like that, something like reading like porn or reading trashy novels, stuff that is not delivering you anything of benefit to yourself. I mean, like I said, I read 2 hours every day, and I try and read stuff that is going to help me with my life or it's going to help me with my job. Trashy novels is not going to do that. I mean, my thing is science fiction. I could read science fiction, there's pulp science fiction, but you know where it's leading. It's not leading anywhere. It's the same story. It's the same outcome. So try and find some help from somebody who's there. That's why I make these videos, to try and help people. I was in that situation. Hopefully something that I said, you never know what's going to affect people. So also try and find help from somebody who is going to the place that you want to go. Now, I'm not talking specifically, exactly like I live in Spain. I want to spend time with my family. I want to do all these things that is specific to my life. But in terms of values and beliefs and principles, I think there's a lot of shared values and beliefs that we can have that drive us forwards and move us. Like we want to get to goals, but it's the journey that matters. It's learning. It's building yourself as you're moving forward. You get up one day and you're thinking to yourself, yeah, I've got all this stuff to do today, but I'm happy where I am. So even though you know that you're moving forwards to something better, you're still happy where you are, right? That's what I'm talking about with having proper values and beliefs and principles. Then you can start to think about the consistent outcomes that you want in your life and move towards those. And then the final thing is to pass it on. Once you've got to that stage where you're saying to yourself, I'm never going to drink again. I'm so happy that I've gone through this journey. Pass it on, even if it's only leaving a comment or multiple comments on videos like this one. Telling people about your journey, because you wouldn't believe how helpful it is for somebody in the beginning of that journey, or when they're trying to make that decision to move across and start their journey, how helpful it is for them to see that people have done it before, people who are just like them in their situation, doing their job, living their life, that kind of stuff. It really helps. So it's the proper word of encouragement. We talked about courage at the beginning of it, and it's in the word encouragement, right? To give courage to somebody else, to encourage somebody else to do this and to take that trip, to encourage somebody else and to give them the inspiration that you don't need alcohol, that alcohol is going to take you backwards. It's not going to move you forwards in any way, shape or form. You might think it's a tool that is helping you in the moment, but add all those moments together and they build up to a whole heap of nothing. In fact, it's taken in the opposite direction. So anyway, I'll leave it there today. If you have anything that you want me to cover in the videos, any topics that you'd like me to cover, any problems that you have, any comments like this that we can help other people with and make videos to help other people, then please don't hesitate to write them down. We're going to be putting up a Google Doc soon, so you can use that as well. I haven't sorted that out yet. So Habits V2 is our website if you want help from me. All the videos are done. We've got a program over there that is daily videos right through preparation, 2 videos a day, one in the morning, one in the evening, and it just helps you from that perspective of where you are to get to that next stage. I mean, it's a full year to get you to a full year alcohol free, and I think it's the best course around. From my perspective, it just teaches everything that I've learned and everything I want to teach. So we've also got some one-on-one coaching as well with me. There's nobody else that does the coaching. Take care of yourself, and I will speak to you again very soon. Onwards and upwards. Keep the alcohol out of your mouth. Bye now.